one of the first things that we have to look at as we kind of look at how we are called to be able to right wrong is that we need to see the battle that is around us. From the moment that Sully sets foot on Pandora, he's told what to believe. He's told to fear the Na'vi natives, and that the colonel's there to protect him. He's told that the natives are enemies, that in fact they devalue them to justify their actions as a people and to pursue their own interests in mining that world. There's a personal agenda that's going on here that really is selfish to get what these people want, and there's a fear that is created so that the people would fall in line and follow this agenda that's taking place. The actions that happen in this movie are not based on the best interests of everybody concerned, but rather they're based on personal interests and selfish interests that is going on. And so it's up to Jake Sully then to see this deception, this battle that is going on around him. Fighting injustice starts by exposing the deceptive motives. There was a story in 60 Minutes back in 2003. Being in real estate, you pick it up on it right away. And it was a story about how cities were using eminent domain. You guys remember that story? To be able to take property, and not for the public best interest of, to put, some public building, but in fact, they would take the property of an owner so they could sell it to a developer who could produce something better that could generate income to the city. And they would do that by calling it a blight and saying they were doing it for the better good of the city. Well, through the story and through actions, many of the cities were stopped, of course, because they realized this wasn't in the best interest of everybody concerned. This was in the best interest of the city of wanting to produce more money, or even there were stories about how, one story, for example, back in the East where there was an Ace Hardware wanted to get a bigger property, and there was a brake shop that, he wanted that property. And so instead of going to the brake shop and saying, "Can I buy your land?" he went to the city and said how a bigger store over there of a hardware store would be better than a tire shop. And so therefore they went through this whole eminent domain process. There's injustice all around. There's the injustice that we often talk about how we speak up for an unborn child that can't speak for themselves. There's injustice at the workplace sometimes where you see how an employer is mistreating employees, and you see it going on. There's injustice in the schoolyard when you see how classmates are treating other classmates. All around us, there is injustice going on. And Scripture does talk about how there are times where we speak up and there are times that we don't. I can tell you, I should have wrote it down, but in the context of where it's in 1 Peter, I think, where Scripture talks about being silent, it's usually in the situations where the injustice is against me. And that we can honor Christ sometimes where as a Christian we turn the cheek or whatever you might say. But certainly when we see the injustice of other people, those are moments where we as Christians are called forward to stand up and right the wrong that we see that's going on. Sometimes that injustice can be much more personal in relationships when we see someone we know and how they're mistreating other people. Or in actions of dishonesty that we might see that are taking place. And so we're put in that position where God calls us to ask ourselves, are we willing to speak up? And so Matthew 25 then reminds us that motives matter in our life when we take action. This passage is not saying that we are saved because of our actions. It's not saying Jesus is separating because of the actions. But in fact, it says that we take actions because we are saved, because of who we are. These sheep in this story they say that in the passage, they don't even realize that their actions matter. They just did the right thing because it was the right thing to do. They fed, they clothed, they gave shelter to people because it was the right thing to do. Galatians 6:20 or 6:10 says this: "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good for all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers." Proverbs 31:8-9 says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy." We're to fight injustice because it's the right thing to do. And to do that, we must look at the past actions and the actions of people and be able to examine the motives that are behind them. And sometimes that examination is not just against the battle that is around us. Sully entered into this world with his own set of prejudices. He was a Marine first. He distrusts doctors and scientists. He saw aliens as primitive. Past experiences had taught him, excuse me, as a human being to be able to trust, those that are around him first. And so in this particular story, there's a scene where he's kind of challenged as he's into the tribe of the Navi people, and they're considering whether or not, he's told to go in there, or he really wants to go in there and to be able to influence those people. There's a challenge of whether or not he's able to even see the battle that even exists within him. Take a look.
What are you called?
Judge Sully.
Why did you come to us?
Came to learn.
We have tried to teach other sky people. It is hard to fill a cup which is already full.
My cup is empty. Trust me. Just ask Dr. Augustine. I'm no scientist.
What are you?
I was a Marine. A warrior of the Jarhead clan.
Sam si u pak? Po të suno e të spivan neftuet!
Se quello ave, un il ragno sanzio, at sole aungal. Ore a un garo lutekin, a numane ul.
Maite. Onge afia ori zelingasa, nume si vi porru. Fitet si vampil volte, si ti viran na iweng. Golpo leon fort. It is decided. My daughter will teach you our ways. Learn well, Jake Sully. Then we will see if your insanity can be cured.
To fight injustice, as we're called to do, sometimes it requires us to see the battle that is within us. Sully may think that his cup was empty, but it wasn't. He had devalued the Navi people or Navi tribe. He saw them as primitive. They're lacking the technology and all the things that, as human beings, of course, we think defines us as being better. He even describes in one scene, actually you'll see it later, as tree huggers, environmentalists, which, the whole movie has all kinds of stuff about politics and environmental stuff. But he sees them in that context that, that's all it's about, because he didn't understand them. He sees the human cause as being more important. And in fact, as you go through the movie, that's his initial motive, is how he can carry out, the purposes that he's there for as human beings. And so for him, he has to remove this personal prejudice, this barrier that exists within himself in order to be able to truly see what's going on. Is he willing to respect their beliefs? Is he willing to make a long-term commitment to be able to understand these people, or does he want it to happen quickly? Can he humble himself enough to be able to open up and learn what is going on? Is he willing to risk everything for the sake of what's right? We are called, really, in Scripture, it talks about us willing to empty ourselves for the sake of others. Matthew 25 describes two reactions to the same group of people. I mean, we often think, when you look at that story of sheep and goats, the sheep are the believers, and then the goats, of course, are all those non-Christian people that aren't here on Sunday, doing whatever they're doing. But really, that's not. The story, Jesus refers to people who are living among his followers. That, in fact, there are other passages where Jesus talks about, wheat and the chaff and the sheep and the goats as being together, because there's no way to distinguish them in and of themselves just when you look at a group of people. That, in fact, there's a mixture there. And so, in fact, in that particular passage, Jesus, when he describes those in need, he describes them as brothers and sisters. These are my brothers and sisters. I'm not talking about those people out there that none of us know or that don't even believe. I'm talking, Jesus is saying in this example, about brothers and sisters, people within the church that are around us that are in need. Those are the ones that Jesus is describing. And certainly, the Scripture goes on and says, we need to care for the others beyond that. But Jesus in the passage is describing that in these group of people, there is one group that is willing to set aside their personal ambitions, their personal prejudices for the sake of others. There's one group of people who might look at other people and instead of thinking, well, you know what, they made this mess, they need to get out of it. They made that bed, lay in it. There are a group of people saying, no, I'm the one who's called to step up. There's a group of people who instead of thinking, well, someone else is doing it, that's what we pay other people to do, are willing to take a look and be able to take a stand in looking at it. The other group, of course, in this context of what Jesus has, they have reasons for everything. The other group, of course, has to justify, or is easy to justify why they felt it wasn't their job. Maybe it's their own agenda. Maybe it's the fear in their own life. Maybe it's some of those other deceptions that we talked about earlier around them that cause them to say, no, this isn't something I have to get involved in. And so when you look at the two people that are within the story of Matthew 25, you see that within those people there has to be a removing of themselves. Jesus himself says, we die to ourselves to serve him so that we can truly live. That there's an emptying of ourselves so that we can become part of what God has really called us to be. And so really, when again in this passage, the sobering accusation here is in this passage is that it's describing a sin of omission. We talk about sin as the things that we do and how bad they are. Well, right here, Jesus describes there's another sin. There's a sin of choosing not to do what's right, choosing not to do what we're called to do. And so then there are those who are guilty of doing nothing. What keeps us from doing something is our own prejudice. What keeps us from doing the things that we should be doing is our rationalization of either devaluing others around us or lifting up our own personal agenda as more important, or choosing to just relate to those we understand and not to make the effort and the commitment to understand those we don't. Because when we do that, if we don't bother to understand them, then I don't feel as guilty. I don't feel personal. I feel detached. And we rationalize it that way. But Jesus holds us accountable by saying we are responsible. When something's wrong, we are the ones to make it right. We are put in a situation where we need to make a choice. Are we willing to stand up and do what's right? Personal excuses, rationalization, any of that is not excusable. Emptying our cup, seeing the battle, requires us to see new eyes. That's really what has to happen. We have to be able to see things differently. And so in the movie, we see that Jake is changed as he learns the ways of the Navi people. He's told that he needs to see things through their eyes, to see things through their perspective if he wants to truly understand and truly be able to see how to right the wrong. Take a look.
Okay, this is video log 12 times 21:32. Do I have to do this now? Like, I really need to get some rag.
No, now, when it's fresh.
Okay, location, shack. And the days are starting to blur together. The language is a pain, but I figure it's like field stripping a weapon. Just repetition, repetition.
Nari.
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 Doing it stronger.
Like Tiri calls me scown. It means moron.
This is a very important part of it.
Norm's attitude has improved lately.
But it's not just I'm seeing you in front of me. It's I see into you. I see.
It's good he's back on board, but he thinks I'm a scound
I
too.
understand you. So you gotta get this, okay?
I gotta run. Okay? Let's go. My feet are getting tougher. I can run farther every day. I have to trust my body to know what to do.